Story time about how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. It's been 10 years since this happened, but when I was in high school, I was really popular. I was in the cheerleading squad, the badminton team, the volleyball team, and drama club. All the teachers knew me and I got along with almost all the students. I never had any problems with girls or guys. My high school principal was a huge history buff, and so was I. One day I went to his office and asked him if I could start a history club. He was really impressed by this and he said yes. I started asking students if they wanted to join, and mostly it was only boys. And these were the boys that I knew had a crush on me, but I made a promise to my parents that I would focus solely on school and not boys. So that meant no boyfriends for me, and I was totally fine with that. I wasn't boy crazy or anything. I really just wanted to get into a good college and make my parents proud. After I formed the club, the principal asked me if he could sit in on some of the sessions. I said, of course. Our history club would get together every Wednesday, and he would always show up without fail. I mean, obviously, I thought that he was interested in history, and he just wanted to share this experience with us, but clearly I was wrong. After a few weeks, things were getting a little strange. When it was my turn to read, I would always notice him staring at me. And he also brought up the fact that there were only boys in the club. I explained to him that they probably just had a crush on me and that at least it was a way to get them into the club. He told me I needed to find girls because I was too much of a distraction for the boys. But the way that he said it just sounded like he was really jealous. I did my best to get girls in the club, but literally nobody wanted to join. After a few days, I realized that maybe the best thing for me was just to cancel the club. I was already in so many other clubs, and I didn't want to sacrifice my grades. I basically told the guys that we weren't going to have the club anymore, and they all said that was totally fine. But when I told the principal, he flipped out. He started yelling at me and told me that if I didn't keep the club going, that I would never make it in life. He said I wasn't being responsible and that I was letting down the club. So then I was basically forced into continuing the club. But then things got even stranger. He started showing up to every single get-together. And every time that it was over, he would ask me if he could walk me to my car. I mean, at first I thought he was just doing it so that I could be careful, I guess. But we were still on school property and I'm pretty sure nothing was gonna happen to me. That's when my principal started asking me if I was dating any boys or if I had any crushes on boys. I obviously felt very uncomfortable when he asked me this, so I simply answered no. Then he told me that I could be honest with him. That's when I told him that I made my parents a promise because I was so close to graduating high school and avoid any distractions like boys. That's when he said that I was an amazing woman and that he wished more of the female students were like me. I quickly got in my car and went home. By the way, I was 2 months away from graduating from high school. Now this is when things start to get really weird. I started seeing him around everywhere in school. Our school was pretty big, but I kept bumping into him everywhere. Every time I would see him, he would be like, "Ho ho, are you stalking me?" I would laugh it off and continue walking. One day after history club, he asked me to come to his office with him. He said that he had a surprise for me. He took me to his office and gave me a book on history. I thanked him and tried to leave as quickly as possible, but then he said, "Don't you like it?" So I stood there having to pretend that I was happy that he gave me this book, when in actuality, it made me really uncomfortable. That's when he said that he had seen me in the library reading a book on World War II, and that he just wanted to surprise me with the same book. So this was already letting me know two things. Number one, he's watching me around school and at the library. And number two, I'm not noticing when he's watching me. I was so creeped out, but I managed to keep my cool. I said thank you again and basically ran away. For the rest of that week, I tried to avoid him as much as I could. I didn't go anywhere near his office, and I avoided the library, which was one of my favorite places in the school. At this point, graduation was only a week away. I was totally wrapped up in my studies that I actually forgot about the principal. Until one day I get a friend request from him on Facebook. At first I thought it was weird, but then I accepted because I figured, well, I'm graduating, so I'm not really going to be seeing him anymore. 5 minutes after I accepted his friend request, I get this really long message from him praising me, saying all these great things about me. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply said thanks. Finally, the day of graduation came and I was forced to see him face to face. That's when he told me that he actually had another gift for me. That's when he hands me an envelope with a blank check. He had the biggest smile on his face. I told him I couldn't accept it and he got mad. After he hands me the blank check, I look at it and tell him that I simply cannot accept it. That's when he gets really angry, snatches the check from me, and tells me that he'll see me later. After the graduation ceremony, I was so happy and I was with my family. That's when he walks up behind me and asks me to keep the check. My family is watching this whole thing go down, by the way. I look at him and say thank you, but no. He then introduces himself to my family. But of course, he doesn't bring up the whole check thing. We all say goodbye and my family and I go have dinner. That very night, he sends me a message on Facebook again, saying that he shouldn't have given me the check, and he felt like he had crossed the line. I actually felt really bad, so I replied asking him to not feel bad. A week later, I get a text message from him. He said that he took the liberty of looking up my phone number and that he actually really wanted to speak to me. He asked if we could meet up for a coffee, and I said yes, unfortunately. We meet up at the coffee shop, and as soon as we sit down, he starts to confess his feelings for me. He said that I was basically his dream girl and that all he wanted was a wife like me. And he also asked me if I would ever consider dating him. I was actually too stunned to speak. As soon as he realized I wasn't saying yes, he asked me not to say anything, got up and left. I ran home and told my parents everything. My parents were really angry. My dad went straight to the cops. The cops told my dad that they had complaints from other students. He apparently did the same thing to them and asked them out once they graduated. And guess what? One of them said yes. The cops even investigated him after.
Humans were the diplomats and negotiators of peace. They kept their 4 world wars well hidden from the galaxy. When a warmongering species thought humans as an easy target, they found out how good at war humans really can be the hard way. We towered over the humans by several feet when we first met with their leaders and judged them to be an inferior species physically. For years, they kept the peace between colonies and kept even the most violent clans at bay. They created the Galactic Order of Peacekeeping and sent dozens of emissaries to each planet. Most emissaries were human, but select bright individuals from each planet were accepted and indoctrinated into their way of peace. Their negotiation skills were unmatched, as any one of their emissaries could be completely comfortable in any situation. It didn't matter if they were settling a dispute in the middle of bumfuck nowhere between 2 towns with a combined population of under 200, or negotiating an armistice between 5 different planets. Their level of calm and tact was unmatched during negotiations, and so we figured that they became top of the food chain on Earth due to their minds. In a way, we were right. Their skills of manipulation played a part in their success. Things were dire then on Anacor 6. Global food shortages, followed by pandemics, followed by a multitude of natural disasters, each more damaging than the previous. All of these things brought shortages. Shortages of food, of medicine, and finally of space to live. Anacorians faced a choice. We had to expand or die. So in the 4th cycle of our year, Anachia Quetzal I rose to power. Similar to each Anachia before him, Coming One displayed wisdom, influence, and a fierce aptitude in combat. We are a proud people with a proud history. Perhaps that was a part of our downfall. As we conquered the first planet Exaxcoria, we got our first taste of wealth. Too long had we suffered with hungry bellies and scarce resources. We deserved more. According to Anachia, we deserved a whole new planet. So when the humans came to negotiate a ceasefire, we ignored them, and we took over another planet, barely slowing in the wake of our destruction. Eventually, they sent another emissary, a woman called Jane Halifax. Anachia had already been proud, but now he had grown greedy, arrogant, and prone to outbursts. And so when Jane tried to negotiate with him eventually, he lost it, killing her with one swift backhand to her skull. Her name was forever etched into the history of our downfall, and the history of the humans' uprising. Anachia made a martyr out of Jane and a fool of our proud race. He invaded Zenithan the next day. Not even 2 days passed before we felt the full power of the humans. They mobilized as if they had been waiting for this moment in the shadows for centuries. They had spent years and years embedding their emissaries in each planet. We didn't even realize they were researching, collecting, and improving each planet's technology by light years. Their weapons of war were unsurpassed, as each was the peak of weapons technology in the galaxy. Our plasma cannons barely scratched their bombers as humans rained down fire on colony after colony of Anacorians. When they had to fight on the field, they were terrifying animals dedicated to absolutely dismantling the enemy. They fought to the last human, never losing momentum, never losing their fierce bravery in combat. I once commanded an attack on a human base where they truly fought to the last. Once all his comrades were killed, the last human continued fighting and killing my troops for a full 15 minutes. When his plasma rifle ran out of ammo, he switched to his knives. When his knives were stuck in the skulls of Anacorians, he switches to his fists and elbows, using sharp targeted blows to cripple us. It's as if he knew the weak points in our bodies better than us. He never stopped, he never slowed, and he never gave up. As he lay there dying, he detonated a plasma charge and took out 5 more of my men. Relentless. Within a week, they had beaten back our advances in our Zenithan, and within a month, they had total control over Zaxcoria. We were foolish to pick a fight with the humans, as other planets in the galaxy all lended aid to the slaughter of my people. After all, the humans had made alliances with everyone. In the end, when humans took Anacor's Sict a month later, they hanged Anachia Disiu I naked and upside down in front of our Capitol building. As if they had not dominated enough, they then executed every one of the Anacorian emissaries. We thought that was the end. We were again wrong. The humans were angry. They wanted revenge. They wanted a display of overwhelming force, and they wanted to ensure they would never be provoked again. After they left, they used the pinnacle of their weapons technology to wipe out the entire planet of Anacor VI. An entire planet was reduced to rubble adrift in space. An entire history of a proud people nearly erased. Almost 300 Anacorians had been off-planet at the time of destruction. The humans came to negotiate the terms of our surrender soon after, and offered us a place to live, Earth. We had little say, of course, and so terms of our surrender included us being their slaves. We've toiled in back-breaking manual labor ever since then, driving the wheels of their industry forward. Earth went from being the good-natured peacekeepers of the galaxy to the terrifying leaders. Children from planet to planet woke screaming with nightmares as parents rushed in. "What is it, child? What monsters have you been dreaming of?" the parents would say. Eyes filled with fear, the child's response was the same every time. Humans.
I'm 19 years old. I've never had a boyfriend, but what I do have is a 30-page list full of qualifications and standards said person has to meet. Before I share this list, I do want to say I've made a lot of modifications over the years in attempts to make it more realistic, but hasn't really worked. So if you meet all of these qualifications, DM me. First of all, I have to be attracted to the person. I'm not one of those girls that can just go solely based on personality, but I don't have like a ton of physical qualifications. I used to be super picky about height, but now as long as you're taller than me, I'm cool with it. I'm 5'4", so it's not that hard. You could be 5'5". I would prefer 5'7" and above, but I don't really care. I used to be obsessed with very strong masculine facial features, but now you just gotta have a good, strong jawline and a sweet looking face, almost like deer-like. I don't know. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about when I say that. As long as your eyes and hair match your other physical features, they look good on you. I don't really have much else to ask for that. You just gotta have good hair and good eyes. Now, for smiles, I am pretty picky. You gotta have a good smile. I don't know, to me, it's a really big deal. And you also have to look clean. I don't know, hygiene is a huge thing for me. Moving on to personality, where my list of qualifications is 10 times longer. You must understand emotions, and I don't care if you're a little bit emotional too. I am super emotional and I cry a lot, and I cannot have people yell at me when I cry. It's a requirement that this boy be like a happy ray of sunshine, a golden retriever energy. I have to have that because I'm a little bit more on the sadder side, and I can't have another sad person. I am working on it though. You have to match my obsession with the beach and sunrises and sunsets. I'm pretty brave, but I need someone a little bit braver than me to, look out for me. I would like to think of myself as a pretty simple gal, but I want to be best friends. I want to be your best friend, and I want you to be my best friend. I love watching sports and doing them, and just kind of anything that has to do with physical movement. So you have to be a little bit athletic. I like to take things extremely slow, so you have to be willing to work with that. I need someone that has a very contagious laugh and that laughs a lot. And I promise I have a bunch of wonderful qualities that would make me a great girlfriend, fiance, wife, whatever.
Am I the asshole for kicking my son's girlfriend out of our house? My husband, 58 male, and I, 56 female, recently met my son's, 24 male, girlfriend for the first time. He's been crazy about her. Apparently, they've been dating for a year before he decided to have us meet her officially. What he's told us about her all seems great. She's just got her degree, was enjoying her job, family-oriented, etc. I'm honestly just glad he's happy with her. My husband and I don't think he's ever been this into someone before, so I feel pretty bad about what I did. Last weekend, he brought her over for dinner. By now, we'd been anticipating meeting her with how much our son has been gushing about her. How perfect she is, that she's the one, in his words. They ring the doorbell. We open the door. She looks exactly like her pictures, which is a great start. My son is grinning ear to ear. Another great start. We invite them in. She accepts my hug and a firm handshake from my husband, and then she opens her mouth. Quote, "I'm the one your son puts his in. To be frank, I was appalled. I expected my husband to laugh. Both he and my son are jokesters, and as annoying as it can be, I love it. But this was just too much for me. Maybe I'm reserved, but of all the things she could have shared about my son, she told us that one look at my face and my husband knew how much I disapproved. Maybe I let my expectations get too high and it's unfair to have them, but I reiterate, of all the things to say to her boyfriend's parents, whom she'd never met, she chose that. My son was amused at first, but when he noticed my reaction, his face dropped. I felt like he'd sold me the full package, everything he'd always been looking for in a girlfriend. I was too disturbed by the visual it put in my head, and it translated into anger. I told her to get out, and I wanted to say more about how gross it made me feel, but I fortunately left it at that. My son didn't want to go, insisting I give her another chance, but I was too fed up and uncomfortable by this point. Even my husband, who's enjoyed his fair share of raunchy jokes, wouldn't let it up. They left, and I immediately felt guilty. This was something my son had really looked forward to, and I felt like I took it away over a dumb joke. I tried calling to apologize, but he hasn't responded. My husband thinks she's the one who should apologize. I'm considering giving her another chance, but before I do, was I the asshole?
Humans are reverse Kryptonians. They are weak on their home planet, but strong everywhere else. No one knew this until Earth was attacked, and humanity was taken off of Earth to be enslaved. Their attack was swift and deadly. Within a week, 2/3 of the world's population had disappeared, or at least was what we assumed, since on the second day, communications started to fail. Soon enough, there was no one left that was able to fight. Only kids and teenagers roamed the streets, with empty eyes and dull spirits, having lost all sense of security and hope. The remaining 1/3 was left to cope with this new reality, where aliens did in fact exist and had taken over our planet. We, according to the broken transmission that we'd received from them directly into our minds, were the gifted ones, worthy of their mercy, the mighty Azarner, conquerors of worlds. Just as long we would submit ourselves to them, to serve them as they saw fit. In order to do so, we had only to surrender to their machines, under the promise that we would not be harmed within the following week or face total obliteration by means of their terraforming contraptions. Our future was a gloom one indeed, either live in servitude of our family's killers or risk being dead ourselves. Many, as myself, took the coward's way out and chose to live, even if living was in fact surviving. We were taken into giant pod-like structures by our captors, by then showing their faces to us. Humanoid-looking lizards, with black scales covering most of their body, with the exception of the soft skin in their chests, and blood-piercing eyes, hissing and screaming into our minds, breaking our spirits even more. Our pod was taken to one of the many worlds they conquered, and then terraformed. During the time that it took to get there, we were forced to hear the countless glorified stories of their kin. How they took over many planets before ours, how they killed or enslaved their inhabitants, how they were merciful to let us live, and how they then transformed the planet into their own image. A desert-like dystopia, filled with sand and burning with the heat of 1,000 furnaces. They laughed at us, of our meek structure, of our lack of strength, and how we would be unable to survive for long on their mining colonies. It is ironic, though, how they would come to regret every single one of those laughs and taunts. Soon, but not soon enough, we reached our destination and were put to work. It was a strange world indeed, very different from our own. The gravity pull was enormous, and most of us were left exhausted as soon as we set foot into the planet. The sky was filled with a violet-like hue, with blue like suns filling the sky in an endless day with no night in sight. The first few days took their toll on our numbers, with countless of us succumbing to tiredness and despair. Yet, for those of us who were able to survive a little while longer, things started to change within the first week, or at least of what it seemed to be a week, since there was no night for us to control time in this strange world. First, gravity seemed to affect us less and less. Suddenly we weren't so tired nor feeling so weak, yet most of us dismissed it as a result of the numbness that was affecting us all. However, soon enough, strange events started to occur that we could no longer dismiss as hallucinations or numbness. We felt deep within us that something was fundamentally altering us, making us stronger, making us wanting to fight, to release ourselves from the shackles of our captors, strike them on behalf of our kind, to exact revenge for all the countless lives that were taken due to the greed and arrogance of our enslavers. The revolution started. It was swift and deadly. Our captors' bodies were soft and crunchy, like crackers filled with red jelly and pain. Their machines no longer frightened us, but were like toys, easily broken by a simple touch of our hands. Anger burst through our eyes in the form of deadly red, like lights that scorched the surface of the cities in the colony that we were deployed to. Soon we found that we were no longer bound by the planet's gravity, nor needed its air to survive, and, with the help of the sudden increase of our understanding of their technology, we easily located the remaining colonies. Yet, we were not alone. Thousands of humans had survived and transformed throughout their colonies, and suddenly, our captors turned into mere ghosts, remnants of a past soon to be forgotten. Only one location remained, our birthplace, where we were stripped of our hope and innocence. However, it no longer resembled the Earth that we left behind, but it was turned into a planet of their liking. And that was indeed the last mistake that they ever made.
Am I wrong for canceling the entire vacation when I found out that my stepdaughter deliberately hid my daughter's passport to get her to stay home? I've been married to my wife, Beth, for 5 years. I have a biological daughter named Jessica, she's 18, and I have 2 stepdaughters named Monica and Leah. They're 25 and 28. Both are single moms and live with us currently. There's been issues about my stepdaughters asking my daughter to babysit the kids. Jessica didn't have a problem with it at first, since this is what she does to earn money, but since her stepsisters don't pay her much, she just refused to babysit. We worked this out by having my wife take care of paying for the babysitting. I planned a family vacation for 3 days and everyone wanted to go. However, both Monica and Leah suggested that Jessica stay home and watch the kids since Beth doesn't want her grandkids to come. They said it's because the kids are used to Jessica and hiring another babysitter would cause issues. They also said that Jessica isn't too fond of our destination, but it was obvious that Jessica wanted to go. They insisted and Beth offered to pay her double, and there was just a lot of back and forth on this until I demanded they stop bringing it up. We were supposed to go last week and everyone had their bags and we were at the airport and it was time to go. Jessica found out that she didn't have her passport on her. We searched her bag, then went home and searched there. Beth and my stepdaughters kept insisting that we go back to the airport or else we'd miss our flight. They insisted that Jessica stay at home with the kids. They even told the new babysitter to go home because she was no longer needed. I refused to go and kept searching for the passport until Monica admitted that she helped Leah hide Jessica's passport to get her to stay home with the kids. I was livid. I tried to get her to tell me where it was, but she said Leah had it. Leah denied, so I threatened to cancel the vacation, and that's when they gave it back. I decided to actually cancel the vacation and blew up at both of them and berated them. They stayed upstairs for a while and Beth refused to speak to me and said that I punished my stepdaughters for worrying about their kids and wanting them to stay with someone they know. I got told I overreacted and ruined the trip for everybody.
Am I in a cult/high control group? I would like your perspective. I'm going to list a few laws of the group I'm in, and I'd like feedback on if it sounds cultish, high control, or not. 1. No sex before marriage. I think this is a pretty normal for most religions, but if it's found out that you've broken this rule and you confess, you will be put out for a certain amount of time, and you aren't allowed to speak to anyone in, quote, good standing. Number 2, not allowed to get a nose/face piercing. If I do, I will be shamed and asked to take it out. Number 3, I'm not supposed to paint my nails any color that isn't natural, so I have to do like soft pinks or nude colors. Someone was given gloves to wear on a Sunday because their nails were an inappropriate color. It's also recommended that you not dye your hair unnatural colors. Number 4, no drinking or drugs of any kind, even weed. And if it's found out and you confess to either of these things, you can be put out for a certain amount of time. Number 5, you are supposed to report in every week to let them know if you will or will not be in attendance to meetings. If you will not be in attendance, you're supposed to give a reason why. There are many more things, but based on these things, does it sound like a cult? That's my question. They say that these limitations are to help you basically stay away from sin or stay safe in the world, but as I get older, they feel suppressive.
First time I saw UTS Artemis, I was working as a sensor technician aboard a deep space station, respite from shadow. It floated at the intersection of more than a dozen major FTL lanes and had been one of the biggest shipping and transport hubs in the IN sector. After the war broke out, it had become a field hospital, a strategic waypoint, a refugee center, and a refitting facility for the Imperium fleet and our allies. That was why Artemis had come to us, politely requesting permission to dock for repairs. Artemis was a Kodiak-class destroyer, part of the small expeditionary force the humans had contributed to the war effort. All of the Imperium's allies had sent forces, of course, but the show of support from the United Terran Fleet was noteworthy because it hadn't actually been requested. We were only a few months into the war at that point, and our fleet had already been reduced to a little more than half strength. The earliest battles were both vicious and costly. Our commanders were more accustomed to chasing smugglers than fighting in conventional battle, and they were too heavy-handed in their response. Sending fleets of our most heavily armed vessels to crush our enemies without gathering the necessary intelligence first was foolhardy, and almost half of our heavy cruisers were lost in the first 2 weeks. 3 of our 7 command carriers were gone by the end of the first month. We were outmatched on nearly every front, and many people still say that it was our own fault. Those armchair historians who love to say that peace had made us complacent, prosperity had made us lazy, and that if we'd been ready, then the war would have been over before it had even begun. I'll admit that years of peace hadn't done the fleet many favors, but even Fleet Command's most pessimistic fears couldn't have predicted a full-on assault from multiple enemies across our entire border. Even if we'd been on full war footing from day one, we still would have been scrambling. It didn't take the Imperium's leadership long to realize that a new strategy was called for. The remaining heavy cruisers, heavily armed but slow, were redeployed to defend the civilian colonies from attack. They were our shield. Their orders had been to hold back the enemy at all cost, and their crews can proudly take their place in history for the sacrifices they made to hold the line. What followed was nothing less than an all-out fight for survival, and make no mistake, without the support of our allies, we would have been doomed. When you consider all that, the fact that we were willing to pass up assistance from a willing ally tells you a great deal about how the humans were regarded at the time. Their people were relative newcomers on the galactic scene. They'd only developed faster than light travel a generation earlier, so it had been deemed unreasonable to expect them to participate in warfare on an interstellar scale. The humans been told as much, even been formally released from obligation by the Empress herself, but they'd come all the same. As their ambassador had said, humanity isn't a fair-weather ally. You've got our back, and we've got yours. It was an admirable sentiment, but as I watched the human ship clumsily approach on one functioning engine, I can honestly say I wasn't impressed. To me, she was the very definition of a first-gen FTL vessel, created by a race too eager to visit the stars to consider what they were getting themselves into. Even looking at her, it had seemed like the Terran fleet was still a little too attached to the idea of seaborne warfare. We were short on available space at the time. A farming colony about 3 parsecs core ward had come under heavy bombardment earlier that week, and we were packed to the bulkheads with refugees. We still managed to find a place for her on one of the lower tiers, though, and even devoted a small maintenance crew to assist with repairs. The first round of technical checks only seemed to support my initial impressions. The inspectors' first scans told them that the power systems aboard Artemis were embarrassingly inefficient. As near as we could tell, their reactors were only running at about 70% efficiency. For any Imperium fleet vessel, whether it was a ship of the line or a logistics support ship, running below 95% reactor efficiency was totally unacceptable. Anything less than 90% was considered cause for investigation. She was painfully ugly to look at, too. Even if you ignored the pitted armor and plasma scorches that marred her hull, Artemis's harsh, angular lines still presented a horrid sight next to the elegant form of an Imperium corvette. More concerningly, her side and aft armor were both absurdly light. The most heavily reinforced sections of the hull were at the bow and along the beam, as though her builders had been afraid she might run aground somewhere. The interior compartments had fewer crew amenities than some ground-based simulators. The station's junior communications officer once joked that the crew would have to wash together to keep the water reclamation systems in the green. I wish I could have seen the look on his face when he learned about the communal locker rooms. The humans argued that Artemis was a warship, not a luxury liner, and that creature comforts weren't priorities aboard a human military vessel. One of our reactor technicians actually had to be escorted off the vessel. He threw a fit when he learned Artemis still utilized some analog controls. One of the maintenance team leads had to be formally reprimanded after submitting a report, suggesting Artemis be decommissioned and towed away for scrap. We grudgingly admitted that she had some noteworthy capabilities. She'd obviously been built for speed, and even I could admit that her eyesore of a hull gave her an incredibly narrow scanner cross-section. but for the most part we rated her slightly below a garbage hauler. We kept that opinion to ourselves in public, especially when the human sailors were in earshot. But in private, we all agreed that calling Artemis a warship was an insult to real warships everywhere. It was 3 days after her arrival when the attack came. When the call to action stations came over the loudspeakers, more than a few personnel thought it was a joke, laughing as they leisurely reported to their posts. It wasn't until multiple impacts shook the hull that they realized it was no drill. A massive, unrecognized contact had dropped out of FTL, practically on top of us, and immediately begun firing on the station. Some intermittent and confused transmissions identified the contact as a rill dreadnought, but our receivers were being bombarded with distress cries from dozens of civilian ships, desperately trying to escape the fire that rained down on us. Most were torn to